Welcome to this episode of Your Property Business, the video podcasts that help you get the most out of your own property business.
The other thing I'm sort of getting here from you is the passion and the commitment, I think. So I think often I find people sort of would like to do something with property maybe, and it might be something I'd like to try because maybe my parents or I know a friend who's done it. And I think that gets you so far, but committing to something, I think it seems to me to be the secret sauce of what's going on here. Telling yourself you're going to do it and making something happen. So yeah, explaining that.
Sorry, I was going to say exactly on that note, one of the things I did a few years ago, and I'm just about to make a new one, it's just putting a vision board together. And some people look at it and think it's a whole load of mumbo jumbo, but actually, when you've got someone, whether it's yourself or someone else, if you've got something to look at and you can think, that's what I want to have, or that's where I want to be, it's a little bit of a reminder to suggest, like, whether you're thinking you're doing property part-time or it's a side hustle and you're picking up one property here, one property there, you look at it. And if you've got that, there's a little reminder constantly of what you want to achieve and where you roughly want to go. Because otherwise it's so easy. And I've seen it quite a few times where people have got the kind of like the get up, the go, they're pushing through, and they can't quite find their first deal. And the first deal is always the hardest one. But if you've got something set there and with a picture and in your head, like that's what I want, then you're going to consistently get up and want to go and achieve it. And otherwise you just end up kind of losing it and you're thinking, I've seen people turn up to networking events for like a year and a half, and unfortunately haven't got anywhere, but it's actually paralysis by endless analysis, and they haven't just taken that leap.
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. I think a vision board is really a really powerful way to do it. I'm getting some coaching at the moment, and the coach is telling me exactly that. It's about telling your subconscious that what you want, and having that visual constantly, I think, is a really important part of that. I agree. So you did all these strategies pretty quickly and fairly early on, I would say, and you obviously have your own business now. How did you decide what your business was going to look like? Because you could have done quite a few things within that, and you've plumped for a certain type of business. Just how did you kind of decide? Just tell me a bit about the business first, and then we'll sort of how you got to that point. So what is your business as it stands today?
So Zebra Invest is a property investment and development business, and it's all evolved really from one core idea, and that core idea has evolved, but just grown in scale in what we're doing. And initially, and I've always looked to try and I describe a positive impact, because as soon as you ever talk to anyone about property, they were like, well, landlords, they're scum of the earth. And it's like, well, if they don't exist, where are some people going to live? And I sympathize with some people where they see someone buying up family homes or properties that otherwise wouldn't have been, may have been on to the sales market somewhere else, but actually they bought a family home for a family that can't necessarily afford to buy it, are going to rent it. But in my case, I always try to look at stuff to have a positive impact. And the idea being that if I can buy an empty property or a property that's sat there on the market for a long time, or it's something where it's got structural issues or a real reason why no one can use it, and you can put it back into use, then you're having a positive impact. And to give you an idea, there's been properties where I bought one on Ashtree Road, and the whole property actually had an asbestos roof. And the previous owner had put another roof straight over the top of it, which isn't quite good enough. So we then stripped the whole roof off, put another roof over the top of it. And then internally, we then reconfigured it so it had a nice open plan living space. And the garden had so much rubbish in it. You just wouldn't have ever been able to live there. And there was poo smeared on the wall and everything else. But I then bought, on the flip side, I bought student HMOs where actually the students have all left. They've all actually, just after COVID, they've ended up going back to Greece. The whole place is still full of stuff they've left behind and couldn't take with them. But the landlord hasn't cleared the place out. But they've just given it straight to a lettings agent. The lettings agency haven't cleared it or sorted it out, and just no one wanted to live there. So suddenly you can actually take something that's really not wanted and breathe a bit of life back into it. And even when I've turned old one-bedroom flats where you've had someone unfortunately pass away in them, And you've taken everything back out, and no one else would want to buy it or could buy it, and turn it into a really nice 2-bedroom house that flat that someone could just move straight into without even having to think about it.
Okay, that does give me a really good sense of kind of why you do what you're doing, and the reason you chose the strategy you've chosen, I suppose. So can you give me an example, maybe in a bit more detail, of the types of projects? I think it's fair to say you've done a few different types of, or different, there's not one cookie cutter. I don't sort of put you in a cookie cutter bracket, but I see you kind of as someone who can create options from whatever you're given or whatever you come across. So can you maybe explore a few different types of projects, if you want to call them projects, that you've done, just to explain the kind of the variation of things that you get involved in? The
way I look at it is it's evolution. So when I started my business, I've looked at it and I thought, we're going to do flips on one side. So for those who don't know what a flip is, it's buying a property, doing it up and selling it. It's probably the oldest strategy in the book. There's not one really that anyone trains. Most people turn around and say that if you buy a property, you should keep hold of it, because they are partly right. You have paid a whole load of stamp duty, you've got a whole load of costs, all that time you spent doing the property up, and then just to sell it, you're kind of capitalizing on a small win, but actually the rest of the win is the margin in future. But the thing is, by buying and flipping properties at the beginning, I was only ever looking originally for 1 to 2 beds, short lease flats. And the idea was trying to find stuff where I could see a margin and an uplift. But also those size projects are smaller than what most builders want to do. So if a builder's got spare cash and they go down to an auction, it's not the kind of project they want to work on. So I very much focused on that at the beginning. And I also thought it was a good price point for me, trying to find investors that kind of wanted to build up that confidence that whilst I've done it for other people before, I can do it for myself. So we started very much with those. And then kind of in the area that I was in, it was a really competitive market. So I then did a lot more direct to vendor stuff. And as I was doing that as well, I was like, well, the stuff I've all done before has always been empty. So let's focus more on empty properties. And so the next property I bought was a 2-bedroom semi-detached house. And it had a extension that was built on paving slabs at the back of it, and all the bricks on the inside of the building, rather than being built on their side like that, they're all built on their side like that, so you could almost touch and bend the walls. So we had to put wall ties in it, and then we ended up using acoustic plasterboard, because it's far more rigid, to actually help give a bit more stability to the property. Of all things, bit of an odd one, but it was one that we did. And so I then I was flipping those properties, and as I was doing those, they were generating small pots, generating pots of equity that I was splitting with my investors at the time. And that equity would then spit out some that was money that was helped propping up the main business, and it was also then buying and sorting HMOs. So the idea on the other side was I was buying HMOs, which really it was I wanted to have one strategy that was generating chunks of cash, and one that was generating actual cash flow that you've got as a constant kind of income. So the other side of it was then HMOs, and it's something obviously where I'd used to work for a student landlord. I'd done quite a few of them, so I had a rough idea what I was doing. And to be fair, I went off and I did them, and I thought they were really gorgeous properties at the time, and I learned quite a lot of things at that time which I now don't do, that I've moved across into my current business, or the way it's evolved. And so, but I was then buying empty HMOs, usually where they didn't have they were in Article 4 areas, but unfortunately they didn't have planning permission. So I was buying those, sorting out the planning permission, so uplifting the value substantially on the way in. And as we're doing that, and then borrowing money from investors on those projects, so then when they refinance, the cash from the flip on one side then replaces the cash that you've got left in from the investor on the other side. So one is working on one side to then fund the other, but you're both doing both in tandem. So then you can start growing your cash flow whilst you're still flipping and generating really nice homes for people. So that was the idea. But unfortunately, not all things will go to plan. And with Johnson Street that I did, unfortunately, we got right in the middle of COVID, got downvalued, the products got changed and swapped out. And what I learned, and definitely a learning for anyone who's listening, is if you ever do look at doing a property deal, try and look at your numbers in the worst case scenario. Have a worst, an okay, and a best case scenario, and don't rely on the best, because if things turn out and things are a little bit pear-shaped, the next thing you know, you could be trying to put an extra 40 grand into a property that you don't have.